It's dying down.
All clear, everyone.
Dad, no! This may just be the eye of the hurricane.
Relax. Can't you see how eerily calm it is? See, I told you it was over. I don't remember a bowling alley being there.
Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is August 6, 2021, and although I've started this video with a joke, there's really nothing funny about what I'm going to say, so enjoy the humor while it lasts. In fact, this is about as serious a video as I've ever made, probably more so than most. By the time you're done with this video, I want you to be thinking really seriously about how you are going to prepare for the coming wave of Delta COVID in the next few weeks, because that's really how long there is left before this turns into a major shit show. For get back to normal, write your plans for the rest of the month in pencil, cross your fingers, and get some supplies, because honestly, it's time to batten down the hatches. The CDC is leading people off of a cliff, and there's really nothing that can be done to stop it right now. Nothing. I mean, it would require mass level national action that's not going to happen. So protect yourself, protect as much of your community as you can, but I think staying, a step or two ahead of this on a 2 or 3 month at a time basis is about the best that we're going to be able to manage. So let's get into why I'm telling you this. I have on the screen a tweet I sent last night. It reads, "Serious warning, Delta variant is about to destroy the USA. By the end of September, the country will be in the grips of a disaster. CDC is leading the USA off of a cliff, needs to mandate double mask or KN95 or N95 or elastomeric mask, plus distancing, plus staying home, now, before any more ground is lost." What do I mean by ground being lost? Well, back in mid-May, the CDC told people that if they were vaccinated, they could take their masks off and that everybody could stop distancing. This was some of the most irresponsible advice that possibly could have been given, and it was contradicted by the World Health Organization, who got it right that you needed to leave the mask on, okay? So where we are now, just 2.5 months later, is there's a tsunami wave beginning to form, and I don't believe anything is going to stop it. So we're dealing with parts of nature here. You can't really negotiate with them. A virus, it's like damming a river. If you build a sufficient dam, you can stop the water from flowing. If your dam breaks, the water flows again. It's just nature. Well, viruses aren't even really alive in the classic sense. They are genetic material encapsulated in some protein that drifts around the world, occasionally happening upon a suitable host, which it infects, and it reproduces itself, and then maybe it hitches a ride in another host. You can't negotiate with a virus. It's just a fact of nature. You just have to deal with it. And if you don't deal with it, there are very predictable consequences. And if you do deal with it, you can, deal with it with a certain level of confidence. Well, CDC basically just said, let's take the dam down. We're having a drought. Yeah, well, the next time it rains, there's going to be a huge flood. And that's what we're looking at. So let's look at some graphics. Okay, so here we have a map dated July 1st, 2020. This is the CDC's community transmission map for COVID-19. You can get this and a bunch of the other data that we're using in this video at covid.cdc.gov. All right, so what is the community transmission map? This map measures the rate at which COVID is spreading by the amount of infections in a particular area. So what do these colors mean? Blue is low. That is low level of test positivity. What's test positivity? That's what percent of your COVID tests are coming back positive. So this graph depicts that, but it's also not just test positivity, but number of cases per 100,000 people. So the blue is a low level, yellow is moderate. Then we have the orange and the red. I believe that the orange is 8 to 10% test positivity, and then red is over 10% test positivity. But it can also be in the red 100 cases per 100,000 population. So, because the test positivity can be skewed. If you're only testing sick people or people who you really think are sick, then, are showing symptoms and things like that, you're probably going to get much higher test positivity than you would have in the general population. So that can skew it. But also, counting number of cases per 100,000, that kind of balances it out somewhat. You're using a different metric. So that's important to know about what we're looking at. Nevertheless, there are other things that are making it lower than it seems. CDC, for example, stopped counting breakthrough cases. What's a breakthrough case? It's when you're vaccinated, but you get COVID anyway. They stopped counting breakthrough cases that don't result in hospitalizations several months ago. So, for however much people want to say, oh, this is overrepresentative, there's also things skewing it to be underrepresentative as well. So I just want to point that out. Now, anyway, this is the map of July. Let's look at the map for August. Do you see a problem? I see a gigantic problem. This is Delta COVID, all right? This is not original strain COVID anymore. You might as well think of it as a different virus, because it is. I mean, it's a relative of COVID, but it is a significant mutation, which is more dangerous. It is both more virulent, means it produces more serious, severe disease, and it's more transmissible. It hops more easily from person to person, so every person who is infected is more likely to infect more people. All right? So let's go to a chart looking at that. So this is a chart titled Transmission of Delta Variant versus Ancestral Strain, or the original COVID, and Other Infectious Diseases. So the x-axis, left to right, things on the left are less infectious. People who get infected by it are likely to infect fewer people. Things on the right, it spreads faster. Every infected person is likely to infect more people. So you can see the pink box there represents the general range of SARS-2 COVID-19 original strain. Somebody with that was likely to infect 2.5 people, per infection. So it's spread at that rate. That is a little bit worse than the seasonal flu. It's on the upper end of the common cold. It's equivalent to SARS-1 from about 15, 17 years ago. Same rate as Spanish flu. On the high end, same rate as polio, and also Ebola. It's more infectious than bird flu, and so on. So then we look at Delta. The range on that is 5 to 9. It's more infectious than smallpox, as infectious as chickenpox, and it's about halfway to measles. So 5 to 9 people is a big step up from 3. So it's several times more infectious. Everybody walking around with Delta is likely to infect many more people than somebody walking around with original COVID, okay? So it's also more deadly. It's shifted slightly up on the fatality scale. Obviously, it's nowhere near something like an Ebola, but it is more dangerous than original COVID. Now, while we're looking at this chart, I want to follow up on, well, what does this mean in terms of trying to contain and deal with COVID so that, human life can persist? Well, I would look at these two things separately. The major tools that we have right now against COVID are the vaccine, masks, social distancing, and staying at home. And then obviously other things like washing hands and things like that. So let's take each one of these individually. The vaccine primarily works on the y-axis, meaning if you get the vaccine, you are far less likely to end up with symptoms at all, and then less likely to have severe symptoms if you do get symptoms. You're less likely to be hospitalized, you're less likely to end up on a respirator, and you're less likely to end up dead. All of those are important things. So get the shot if you don't have any health conditions which preclude you from getting the shot. That way, if you do get Delta and you've been vaccinated, the dice are more in your favor as far as what kind of symptoms you're going to end up with. What the vaccine does is it trains your body to recognize and to fight the spike protein that is on the outside of the COVID wrapper, as it were, and then your body will be prepared ahead of time. If you catch out in the wild, it's grocery store or whatever, you catch Delta, your body is already going to have antibodies. It's already going to have a blueprint for how to attack Delta. So let's look at another graphic related to that. This is a comparison of people who were vaccinated and people who weren't. The red line is people who are unvaccinated. The green line is people who were vaccinated but got a breakthrough case anyway. You can see that the x-axis is time, so it's number of days after infection. You can see that for the first almost a week, like 5, 6 days, the viral load is about the same in vaccinated and unvaccinated people. But then after that, on days like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, they start to diverge. So what this means is that while COVID is going to hit both vaccinated and unvaccinated people equally hard in the first few days, vaccinated people will fight it off faster. They will, and that results in a decrease in the viral load in their system. This is, again, on average, but anything you can do to improve your odds in the situation is a good thing. Get the vaccine, because you can see clearly here, if you don't have the vaccine, the body has a much harder time fighting it off. And that's when you're likely to wind up in the hospital or on a respirator while your body is still struggling to get rid of this thing. It's attacking your body and doing damage. So that is pretty clear. Unfortunately, while the vaccine is good for that y-axis, severity of disease symptoms, it's not as good on transmissibility. So looking at, still at this chart of viral load, vaccinated and unvaccinated people for that first 5, 6 days are carrying the same amount of virus in their system. And other studies have shown from nasal swabs that vaccinated and unvaccinated people are carrying the same amount of virus in their nose. That means vaccinated people can spread COVID. So on transmissibility, the vaccine, maybe after that first week is going to result in a drop in transmissibility, although by that point you're probably, self-isolating anyway. But in that first week before it really hits you, you're going to be spreading it to other people. There was a big case in Massachusetts on the tip of Cape Cod, big vacation town. There was a huge outbreak of like about 500 cases, and 74% of the people who spread it were vaccinated. So clearly this is a big problem. This whole thing of just punching down at people, oh, you didn't get the shot, it's your own fault. Well, you can definitely say that people who didn't get the shot and wound up in the hospital, yeah, there's a good chance they wouldn't have wound up in the hospital. Or significantly lower chance of having wound up in the hospital, had they got that shot. And clogging up the medical system, that's not good. We need to reserve that for people who did protect themselves the best that they could. And you know what? Bad luck, just their system didn't fight COVID well, and through no fault of their own, they wound up in the system. But people arrogantly walking around, I'm not afraid of this virus, and then, please help me, I can't breathe. Well, who's afraid now? Again, it's like those people should get help, but really get the vaccine, because right now hospitals are filling up again. Actually, let's go to that right now, and then I want to come back again to the transmissibility thing. So here's hospitalizations. Not good news. As of August 3rd, just a couple of days ago, 7-day moving average was 7,707 hospitalizations. Look back at the peak in January. It's like just a little bit more than double that. So we're at like 45% of the peak. Okay, and we're going to look at total cases in a minute on another graphic. But you can see when I say that there's a tsunami wave mounting, look at the chart. Mid-May, it was going down. CDC was like, hey, everybody, take your masks off if you're vaccinated. But then we know that everyone took their masks off because it was a huge struggle to get people to wear masks in the first place. The minute people weren't being strictly enforced on that, they took all the masks off. So now nobody's wearing a mask. And we know that only about 51% of people are fully vaccinated, yet 99% of people aren't wearing masks. So that's a massive public health failure right there. And it was totally predictable and avoidable. Anyway, hospitalizations. We're at about 45% of the peak. So in other words, where were we last at this level of hospitalizations? Well, in February, but then the curve was going down. When was the last time that the curve was at this point, but it was going up? Back in November. So literally through, this CDC irresponsible advice, we have been set back over 6 months of progress. And who knows where the peak is going to end up this time. All right. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. So we were talking about vaccines and that they greatly reduce the severity of the disease. And that's great. So get the shot. But as far as that transmissibility, why I am hammering so hard on the CDC is because masks work and distancing works and stay at home works. Obviously, also the washing the hands and don't touch your face and all that kind of stuff. But those are personal behaviors. As far as social interactions, masks, distancing, stay-at-home orders when things get crazy, those are needed. And the CDC, people rightfully came down on Trump for doing things like telling Florida not to report their COVID numbers to the CDC, allegedly, for example. Or I don't know if that's been even confirmed by now. That was bad. But what Biden's doing, to me, it's analogous to like climate change. The Democrats are like, we believe in science. And okay, great. I believe in science too. Science is great. But really, they say that and they'll pay lip service to the problem. But because they are as beholden to capital as the Republicans are, then they wind up doing a lot of the same stuff in practice. So they will talk a good game about climate change, climate emergency. But then what do? It's lip service. It's things around the edges. Well, same thing in this case. The Democrats just have their own brand of COVID denial, which amounts to get the shot and then live life as normal. Well, that's not evidence-based. It's absolutely not. Yes, you get the shot, you have lower odds of bad effects, but it's still going to happen to some people that it wouldn't be happening if we just left the damn masks on, for example. So let's talk about masks and transmissibility. I'm going to come back to vaccines and transmissibility and show you why that's not great. But let's talk about transmission and masks. So here's another graphic. This is mean cumulative exposure. This is to the number of particles, infectious particles, for various combinations of no mask, double mask, and unknotted and knotted tucked medical procedure masks. So we have 3 types of masks considered: an unknotted medical procedure mask, then at the bottom, the knotted and tucked medical procedure mask. What is that, you ask? Well, basically those surgical type masks, the medical procedure masks, you can either wear them as is, that is the unknotted kind. But as you know, they tend to have gaps at the sides and also at the top. Well, there's a process, you can look it up online, knotting and tucking it, where you tie a knot in the ear flaps, or like the ear loop thing, so that the sides are more closed. And basically it, gets tucked and it forms a tighter seal around your mouth and nose. And it winds up being more like a KN95 mask. There's, because as you breathe in and out, the idea is that you want the air to go through the mask, not around it. So the fewer, the more snug it is, the fewer gaps you have, that's less space for air to go around the mask and in your mouth unfiltered. That's what we don't want. So you can see there, comparing the unknotted mask to the knotted and tucked mask, well, if the gray line with the hash slashes in it, that's if both people are not wearing masks. So forget about that for a second. But compare the light blue line, the medium blue line, and then the dark line, the dark blue line. So on the unknotted mask, the light blue line is if the infected person, the source, is not wearing a mask, but the receiver, the person trying not to get infected, is wearing a mask, and that's an unknotted one. Well, basically, your odds are slightly lower, or your exposure is slightly lower than if you weren't wearing a mask at all, but not really by much. But then compare that to a knotted and tucked mask. It drops down to less than half. So that gives you like 60% more coverage if you knot and tuck the mask. And that's if you're wearing a mask, but you're around people who aren't. All right. And then, they're putting viral particles into the air. You're going to get exposed to a lot less. Okay. So knot and tuck. If you do have one of those things, knot and tuck your masks. I will put a link to a video showing you how to do that. So what's even better than that? Well, double masking. Again, sticking with the light blue line, that's the source doesn't have a mask, but you're protecting yourself as a receiver. You're wearing a mask. Well, that's going to cut it in half even further. So you're getting like a 6-fold decrease in your exposure over not wearing a mask or wearing an unknotted medical procedure mask. And it's even twice as good as wearing a knotted and tucked mask is if you double mask. So that's really good also. Now, looking at the medium blue lines, that is if the source is wearing a mask, but the receiver isn't. So this is where you would wear a mask to be conscientious about not spreading it to people. Well, that is actually pretty good for not spreading it. So again, compared to the line, the light line above in the top one, the unknotted mask. So you wearing an unknotted mask, that's going to cut things almost in half, not quite. So really, wear the mask. It means you're even an unknotted medical procedure mask. You can see versus no mask. You're cutting it down by like 40% as far as what you're putting in the air. Now, even better than that would be knotting and tucking the mask. Then you're going to be cutting it down by more than half, like 60, 65%. And then, of course, the best thing to do is double mask, and you're going to be putting way less out into the air. Then, on the dark blue line, we look at the scenario where everybody's wearing a mask. Both the source and the receiver is wearing a mask. Well, even if everybody's just wearing the unknotted medical procedure mask with the loose ends on the sides, if everyone wears that, you go down to actually better efficacy than just one person wearing a double mask, whether it's the source or the receiver. So that's why I say the CDC, it's the height of your responsibility telling people to take masks off. Because if everybody even wears a shitty mask, your odds are better than just one person wearing a mask. And then, of course, if everyone is wearing a double mask or everyone's wearing a knotted tucked mask, you can see how far the exposure goes down. It's like less than 10% of what it would be if you weren't wearing a mask. That's what we want. That's phenomenal. And that's how you end COVID. That's how you turn it into a drip, okay? They're not recommending that. CDC is now starting to say, oh, if you're in a high COVID area, you should wear a mask indoors, and if you're not, you can think about it. No, no, no. You're getting people killed. You're perpetuating this disease. And the fact is, again, remember that, Delta is highly infectious, and it jumps from person to person much more easily. 5 to 9 people per infection also get infected. You just don't have the luxury of letting it spread, because that exponential spread is going to get totally out of control, and it's going to cross a number of thresholds where it's going to really impair societal and economic functioning. Okay? So this could be the final nail in the coffin of an already very troubled, U.S. Western system. Now, because the left is not super organized, we're, at the beginning of our efforts to try to do that. That means that I would say the U.S. left is not really prepared to pick up the slack, and we're going to get, nailed by the tsunami just like everyone else. That's why I'm trying to tell you all this at least a few weeks in advance, so you can do what you can. Get your masks, get N95s, get KN95s. If you have to wear one of those little surgical masks, knot and tuck it, please protect yourself. We need socialists to stay in good health and survive this thing. I mean, catching COVID is really not good. Even if you don't die, you can have all kinds of problems like chronic pain, mental fog. Actually, here's a graphic. This is showing cognitive deficits in people with suspected and confirmed COVID-19 illness. And it's showing different possibilities. So different scenarios. Symptoms, but without respiratory symptoms. That's the one all the way on the left. Decrease in IQ. That is what the gray bar shows. The next one, having respiratory symptoms from a COVID infection and no assistance. You're at home. In other words, you don't need assistance. So COVID with respiratory symptoms, even if you don't need help or to go to a hospital, cognitive deficit greater than without the respiratory symptoms. The next one, respiratory symptoms, and you're not hospitalized, but you do need medical assistance, greater cognitive deficit. Then you went to the hospital, so you were hospitalized, but you didn't need a ventilator, much larger cognitive deficit. And then you went to the hospital and you needed a ventilator, about 7 IQ points dropped. So we're talking about physical symptoms, we're talking about mental symptoms. Symptoms of anxiety and depression have been shown to be worse in people who have had COVID. That can be for many reasons, but the bottom line is that it's there. So, yeah, transmissibility. We need to combat the transmissibility of Delta. We do that through masks. If everyone was wearing masks, there would be way fewer cases. This explosion in cases is the fault of Biden's CDC. It's that simple. They had not told people to take the masks off, it wouldn't be at this level. All right? Yeah, they wanted to celebrate that they had exterminated original COVID. 90% of cases are Delta, 10% are original COVID. That would still be, a concern. But yeah, you have gotten it under control, but not Delta. So let's look at another graphic. This is a tweet from Eric Feigl Ding. I love this guy. He's at DRERICDING on Twitter. Go follow him. I agree with pretty much everything he says. Doing great, very critical work in epidemiology. So these are data from Israel, Ministry of Health. Released another vaccine efficacy update due to Delta variant. And what was originally thought to be 93% or 94% efficacy from the Pfizer vaccine, turns out the metaphor I would use here is like a water-resistant watch. Your watch says water-resistant, not waterproof. So you can wash your hands, you can go out in the rain, you can do a few things, and hey, getting a little water on it, you're probably fine. You don't want to take your water-resistant watch deep sea diving, okay? You're hundreds of feet below the surface. There's a lot of pressure. You're just totally submerging it in high-pressure water. Yeah, it's not necessarily going to hold up as well. Well, it's the same thing with the vaccines. It creates COVID-resistant people with lower odds of, symptoms and lower odds of hospitalization, lower odds of needing a respirator, lower odds of death. But they're finding that when you take the approach that the Democratic Party basically is pushing, which is step 1, get the shot, step 2, stop doing everything else, and step 3, blame the unvaccinated for everything. Yeah, that's not accurate, okay? Because you're not doing anything really to stop transmission. The vaccines don't really stop transmission. That's what masks and distancing and stay-at-home orders do. So you're walking around with the vaccine in a high Delta variant environment where you're likely bumping into it all the time. Again, in our metaphor, this is equivalent to taking your water-resistant watch deep sea diving. Well, how does it hold up? Only 39% effective for infection. So you're more likely than not, you're 61% likely to, get infected on exposure. So not good. And then once you get infected, what are your odds of developing symptoms? Well, the vaccine gives you about 40% protection against symptomatic cases. So basically there, if you get it, you're more likely than not to have symptoms. And as we, looking at that cognitive deficits graphic, we know that having a symptomatic case, of any severity is associated with cognitive deficit. Even if it's small, those are IQ points you didn't need to lose. You lost them because of this, period. And then 88% for hospitalization. Well, that's, 12% is about 1 in 9, okay? And then 91% protection against ICU, low oxygen, or death. That's 1 in 11. So That's the waning efficacy. This is dropping and dropping. This is the approach the Democrats are taking. It's no wonder that that August chart looks the way that it did. So, yes, vaccines give you some protection against severity, although it appears to be dropping, in this current environment. And again, it's not really helping with transmissibility because vaccinated people can transmit. So that's why we look at things like this LA Times story. California healthcare workers must be vaccinated by the end of September. Yeah, by the end of September, forget about it. This is too little too late in the extreme. You needed to do something last month to even hope to beat this thing. And end of September, we're going to be, if we're not in, nationwide shutdown by the end of September, I will be surprised. If one isn't warranted, at least. Look at the curve. So let's go back to the curve. I showed you the hospitalizations chart. Here's the actual curve of daily trends in the number of COVID-19 cases in the United States reported to the CDC. It's very similar to the hospitalizations graph. It's a little bit of a better picture, although CDC stopped counting breakthrough cases that don't result in hospitalizations. So, as I mentioned, these numbers aren't perfect. Also, there's not widespread testing going on right now. Why? Because all the travel restrictions have been lifted. So people aren't getting tests as often because they don't need tests to do things as much. So we don't really know. But even just from what we do know, here's the picture. Well, we're currently experiencing the biggest peak since that November to January peak. There have been other peaks, 3 other peaks, 5 total. And this is number 2. And it's just growing because, like I said before, the virus is just a force of nature. It moves in some very predictable ways. When it mutates, that's one thing, then it becomes something else. Then you got to learn what the laws of that are. But we know the laws of original COVID. We know the laws mostly of, Delta, how many people it's likely to infect, how to slow down transmission, and what you can expect in the absence of those measures. Well, what you can expect in the absence of those measures is exactly what I was talking about in that video back in May when CDC said take the masks off. They coast for a little while, and then not much later, it starts to spread again, and it goes exponentially. So again, the last time, just like the hospitalizations curve, the last time we were here was November. So that's how much it set us back. Now, as far as, why this video is such a serious issue, if you think that last year was bad, and it was, what we're heading into looks like it's going to be much worse. Because that curve last year, like I said, it was going down. And, at this time last year, the curve was going down. COVID was being reined in because of all the measures that were being taken. Well, now it's going up. So when people really start going back indoors, September, October, November, depending on, the climate where you live, what we can expect from last year, we have data on this, is the curve is going to go up because people are inside, they're in recycled air, the virus is not getting blown away into the atmosphere where it can, maybe land on a tree and just sort of expire. It's going from person to person inside in unfiltered indoor air. And that's when you get a gigantic spike. Also, people's health tends to be at its worst in November, December, January. The most people die in December and January out of any months. People are just at their weakest. It's the least sunlight, least fresh air, and it's cold. Your body's under strain. So we've got a curve now that's mimicking last November, even before all that. This is the healthiest time of year. People are getting their most fresh air, their most sunlight. People are happiest. Their bodies are under the least stress from the cold. And yet this is going. You want to add indoor air into this? What do you think that's going to do? So when I say that this is fairly predictable, this is what I'm talking about. You just got to ask the right questions. So in the absence of measures to halt the transmission, you can expect explosive exponential growth. So these things about, oh, New York's going to require people in mid-September to show proof of vaccination, you're not doing anything really to stop the spread of this thing. You're maybe doing something to lower the amount of people ending up in the hospital. Great. Okay, that's less likely to clog up your hospital system unnecessarily. But again, it's not going to stop this thing from exploding, or it's going to have minimal effects, at least compared to other tools which are available to you. So anyway, that's the presentation for now. Real cause for concern. And I'm going to go back to the July versus August. You look at that growth rate, and again, you look at the graph of the curve. Where's it headed? What's it going to be like in 3 weeks? Well, if the CDC doesn't dramatically change course, and I suspect that they are not, and this is also down to states and things like that as well. If something major on the order of what was done last year is not put into place immediately, and it might already be too late even, with just how much Delta is out there right now. Like, it's already spread. If this were a house fire, the fire is already bigger than you have water to put it out, okay? If you had put the thing out when it was small, you would have had enough fire extinguisher to put the thing out. Now, it's like, a raging inferno, and you've got 3 fire extinguishers. It's just not enough. So it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. It can get better, but, again, you're dealing with a force of nature. It does not, it cannot be reasoned with. We can't just offer it something and have it stop. And I don't, so to get political for a minute, I got political a little bit before. Why are they doing this? Well, we went through a terrible turn last year with the economy. Profits dried up. Many small and medium businesses went out of business. I mean, you just drive around, the amount of, for lease signs anywhere is really spectacular. So if they hadn't been open this summer as they were, who knows how many more businesses would have closed, etc. But I'll tell you, they want to keep pretending that the eye of the storm is the end of the storm, and it just isn't. It doesn't work that way. And Rochelle Walensky, the head of the CDC, she was a good COVID warrior at the beginning of this. And then they got the directions at some point that said, hey, wrap it up, back to normal. And it's not an evidence-based position. It's a business-based decision. That's the environment that we're living in. So as far as the eviction moratorium ran out, and right now the enhanced pandemic benefits, the unemployment benefits, are set to run out in another month, beginning of September. And in fact, half the states have already probably illegally cut them in an effort to, quote, end the labor shortage, force people back to work. I mean, they're doing this at a time when, like I said, there's a tsunami wave building, and it's going to crash on the shore within a month. I mean, 6 weeks tops. Look at that curve. Look at those charts, the map of the rate exploding. Just do a little bit of extrapolation. And this is on the CDC's website. They see this as clearly as you and I do. And they're just letting it happen. That means somebody else is in the driver's seat, let me tell you. Capital, big business, money. They are in the driver's seat here. This isn't about public health. This is about saving their system, their profits. So, I don't know. I'm coming to the end of the video here. My suggestions are double your frequency of shopping trips and double your purchase of durable staples. Toilet paper, rice, beans, cooking oil, canned and frozen stuff to the amount that you can store it. Don't engage in hoarding because that can set off panics. And it only takes one or two people to set that off. Because if, one or two people see a couple of people stocking up and like walking out with 20 of something, they start to worry, oh, well, when I need it, it might not be there. Even if there's not a real shortage, somebody could just clean it out. I should go get a bunch. And then, demand starts really outstripping supply. You wind up with a shortage, then it makes the news, it goes viral, etc. So start quietly stocking up. Like I said, just get 2 of things. But, go twice a week and get yourself a little bit of a stockpile. I don't think this is going to be like Mad Max, but, things got a little weird last year with like peanut butter and stuff like that. Do what you can. Get stuff that's on sale, like, do what you can. But I would make a little stockpile at home. Don't hoard. But try to get 2 or 3 months ahead of things. That's about the best advice I can give you. If there's mutual aid networks in your area, get involved with them, or, left parties, like whatever the useful organizations in your area are that aren't just about posturing and drama. Like, get involved with those. Do whatever you can. It's about actually working people helping working people. If we are able to take power at some point, so much the better. In the short term, we need to help each other survive in an environment that is as harsh as this one. So anyway, I'm trying to think if there's anything I left out, but I think that that's about it. I was all set to get back to audiobooks, and then I saw some of this data, and I was just like, oh my God. I feel like right now, this is really a really urgent, pressing emergency issue. I don't know if I'm going to be, doing daily COVID updates. I think that that's really overload. I'll do the audiobooks that I can. I really feel like, though, for at least the remainder of this month, the focus needs to be on COVID. We had done S4I Community Project #1. If you're doing a chapter for that, get it in. We already have several chapters, and the playlist is growing. That's great. But and I probably will upload some more commentary and some more critiques and things like that, and some audiobooks in the meantime. But a lot of my energy right now is going to looking at this COVID thing because, again, I think September is going to get canceled. If not September, then October. And people are not going to be happy about it. But I'll tell you what, Delta is 2 or 3 times worse easily than original COVID. And I think at some point, even the people who just try to deny reality, because it hasn't happened to them yet, I think even a lot more of them are going to start getting the message. But, I mentioned climate emergency before. This is a little bit of a dress rehearsal, I think, for what we're going to be going through with that 10, 20 years from now. Because, you have the very blatant denial by Republicans, and then you have the more nuanced denial by Democrats, but neither one of them results in effective action. So what does it matter if Democrats know some of the more advanced slogans and phrasing and terms to use to placate some of the more advanced workers that they can pick off, looking at AOC and things like that? It doesn't matter because none of it results in effective action. So I'm going to end this video with, a sentiment I have put out on this channel often. The fundamental task of the U.S. left in the 2020s is to break with the Democratic Party and establish independent organizations capable of seriously challenging and taking power. We need to break from the Democratic Party because, and this COVID response is case in point. By the way, Biden, not looking good. If he croaks just of natural causes because he's super old and doesn't look in good health. His VP, Kamala Harris, right now is net unfavorable. Her unfavorability is higher than her favorability. You're talking about a party that just is deeply unpopular, doesn't do what people want, is owned by big money, and, is leading us off a cliff. This crisis is case in point, but there are many others as well, where the Democrats, they can claim to be 5% better than the Republicans, but if being 5% better than the Republicans still results in falling far, far, far short of meeting the moment in even a way that meets the bare minimum of the moment, then what's the point? You know, what's the point? We have nothing to lose at this point. Break away. So, on that note, I'm going to thank you all for listening. Feel free to leave comments and questions down below. Thanks also to the current patrons whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen, head to patreon.com/socialismforall. The contributions are very encouraging. They also do help materially. I really appreciate that. If donations aren't your thing right now, completely understandable. If you want to help out, follow on Twitter, subscribe to the channel, leave a like and a comment for the algorithm, and anywhere that you can spread this video is appreciated, particularly if you're on Facebook. Spread it into some left-wing Facebook groups. There's a lot of, thousands of people you can reach with that, and I'm no longer on Facebook. So, that really helps getting that word of mouth out there. Thanks again, and we'll catch you in the next video.